engagement at Volunteer in BC and one of the members of the planning team of the Connecting Together on Senior Social Isolation series. Welcome and thank you so much for being here today. It's a very busy time for a lot of organizations, and it's difficult for staff to be able to spare time. So we really appreciate all of you for making some time to join us today. We had such an interest in this conference, and we're going to have a lot to say about it. But first, I just wanted to go through a few housekeeping items. So we're asking folks to introduce yourself in the chat, your name, organization, and role. This session is being recorded, and when you're not speaking, please ensure that your microphone is on mute so that we can avoid excess background noise. And then we'll certainly have opportunities for Q&A and discussions. So definitely encouraging you to then unmute yourself at those times to speak. We've got, as you see here on the screen, a hashtag so that you can use that on social media, such as Twitter, but you may be on other channels where you can hashtag Isolation to Connection 2021 for our series. Welcome again, once more. We're going to begin this innovative and collaborative workshop series with a simple activity. So but I'd like to start with acknowledging the land that we're on. So we would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we work, that we know as Peel, is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. For thousands of years, Indigenous peoples inhabited and cared for this land. In particular, we acknowledge the territory of the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, and Ojibwe Chippewa peoples, and the Haudenosaunee. The land that is home to the Métis, and most recently the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, who are direct descendants of the Mississaugas of the Credit. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land, and by doing so, give our deepest respect to its first inhabitants. We encourage you to learn more about the Mississaugas of the Credit from their website, which is mncfn.ca for the Mississauga Credit First Nation. And if you visit native-land.ca, you can learn a little bit more about the disputed territories and the unceded territory of the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, the first peoples of this land. And I also really encourage people to check out their blog on nativeland.ca. The community blog is very valuable. Response table, welcome. This community response table was convened at the early part of the pandemic by the region of Peel to bring support together and really consider how we could share service resources and provide an idea about what's going on, helping agencies connect to support vulnerable seniors and at-risk populations. Getting a little bit of background noise, just a warning. Identifying and responding to emergency needs during the COVID pandemic, and to support coordination, information sharing, and problem solving. So all many organizations came to the table at the community response table, and the community response table continues to meet weekly on Wednesdays, and more people are encouraged to have your organization or participation at that table. And then shortly thereafter, a sub-table was formed, which is now referred to as the Peel Seniors Collective. And the Peel Seniors Collective aims to identify how we can reach isolated seniors. We did a lot of research. We developed a report, which we call Isolation Connection, which is why there's that hashtag. The Isolation Connection report really gathered some of the insights from several organizations who were participating at the senior subtable. And we found it was quite valuable to hear from so many organizations, their perspectives on how they were reaching isolated seniors. And we tried to ask the question, how do we see people, how do we find those people who are out of our line of sight? What could we do to identify those seniors who were most vulnerable in our community, and what kind of supports would we be able to have to support them? And through that report, we came up with several recommendations for how we could move forward. And one of the key things, the main focus overall, was around how do we take the ideas and great thoughts that were coming out of the community response table and make them more actionable. So to that end, we formed a steering committee and a planning team to put together this series so that we could start to move in a more coordinated and a more actionable fashion. And that's why this is meant to be a collaborative, and educational series for everyone who's participating. So we're really grateful to have your time and looking forward to your contribution. And we hope that this will just be the beginning of something excellent in terms of our ability to make more of our activities actionable. At this time, I want to invite Ray. Ray Applebaum from Peel Senior Link. He's the executive director, and he's co-chair of the steering committee that's put on this series. And so, Ray, if you're able to unmute yourself now, we'd love to hear a few words from you about the value of this gathering, as well as your insights. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Shane. I appreciate it, and welcome everybody. We're just delighted to have reached this point. When I think about 3 or 4 months ago, this was just a thought that we had. I want to thank the folks, the planning team, the leadership of Heidi and Shan, who brought us to this point, and here we are at the first kickoff session. This is really an opportunity, as Shan said, to take our concern and our thinking and knowledge and experience in the community around how have we really reached out effectively and how can we do better as we go forward to ensure that seniors isolation continues to be top of mind for all of us in terms of how we bring our good services to them. We've all pivoted, as we've experienced in stories and experiences, we've all pivoted to a virtual platform in a significant way, and that really has been extremely helpful. And as Shan's noted, we really want to think about today and over the next month through our sessions, how can we take that, expand it, and apply it to a much larger audience so that we can really get to the very significant large seniors population who are isolated in our communities and who need support as we go forward upon the recovery of COVID-19 and into the future. Today is an opportunity to move to a larger stakeholder group to really enhance our ability to be able to engage all of you in this conversation and come out better at the end so that we can share all our good ideas and our thoughts about how people are and how people think we can move forward on this really big issue. So I just want to thank Sheridan, who've partnered with us, of course, the Region Appeal, to the Community Response Table for sponsoring the senior subgroup, and to the individuals who've helped plan this event and future events into the next month. And just the last piece is we really want to once again thank everybody for responding so favorably to these sessions. We look forward to the outcome and working with you in the future so that we can really address the needs of our isolated seniors in our community. Thank you very much, Shan. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ray. So, as you just heard, Sheridan College, their special events are helping us with some of the technical support for this series.
I had problems with my computer anyway.
It's, we all have some challenges with our technical difficulties and, trying to adapt. So we really appreciate everyone who's made an effort to connect, and we'll keep working on that. And we'll definitely, engage Sheridan throughout this series to help anyone who has any difficulty. And if you do have any difficulty over the course of the series, feel free to email us at the same contact information provided at your registration link, so that we can provide additional support or accommodations as required. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to another key person that has been involved with bringing this series to light, and that is Heidi Yerksa. And Heidi, can I invite you? Heidi is the chair of the planning team and also executive director of Seniors Life Enhancement Centers. Heidi.
Yes, thank you. Again, welcome everybody. Really excited to see the number of people who have joined us today and all of your introductions in the chat. So if you haven't had a chance as you're listening, scroll through and get to know who else is in the virtual room with you. So again, the themes for this conference are really connect, collaborate, and innovate, which is something that we've all found valuable over this especially over this past year and a bit. I think in general, we've always tried to work together, and just finding now that we've been pushed remote, these themes really come into play even more so. So again, you're going to find throughout the conference series, these themes really highlighted. Again, sorry, next slide. Thank you. So just to give you a little overview of what to expect over the next few weeks with us as you join. So we have, sorry, my computer's giving me some pop-ups here. So session 1 is today. So today we're really hoping to get a better understanding of the issues, and I'll be introducing our keynote speaker shortly. The next session, which will be held on June 7th, we're going to be highlighting some successful initiatives that have taken place over this past little while. Session number 3 is going to talk a little bit more about building capacity and some opportunities and some learnings there. Session 4, which will be on June 21st, is about diversity and leveraging technology. And on session 5 will be our closing session. And we're really going to focus on communication and collaboration through a keynote speaker, as well as some networking. So again, if you haven't registered for any of these sessions, please do head over to Eventbrite and register for these sessions. We hope to see you all at them. And there'll be more information coming for each session, so you should be getting some emails about that as well. And sorry, next slide. So it is my privilege to be able to introduce our keynote speaker or speakers. So today we have Lee Hayden from Sheridan Center for Elder Research, as well as Donna Slater, and Donna is from Food for Life. So again, there was a joint partnership formed between Community Development Halton, as well as Sheridan Center for Elder Research. So Lee will be presenting about that, as well as the partnership that was formed between the two organizations I just mentioned. A little bit about Lee. So Lee is the, sorry, just next slide. Sorry, nope, I got it. Okay, so Lee is the project coordinator at Sheridan College's Center for Elder Research. She's a medical anthropologist who obtained her doctorate from McMaster University. She's interested in how culture shapes aging and caregiving. She's a considerable experience in working in academic hospitals, specializing in knowledge translation and applying research knowledge to improve people's lives. So we're excited to introduce Lee, as well as Donna. Donna Slater has been working at Food for Life for 5 years. She has spent her last 12 years within the nonprofit sector, working in community development and volunteer engagement. Donna has a passion for working with community partners to better support those in need of a hand up. So welcome both Lee and Donna for our keynote session about understanding the issues.
Great, well, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation, and we're really excited to talk to you about some of the work we've been doing. Donna, did you quickly want to say hi before I jump into our link?
Sure, everybody, welcome. Thanks for having me, and look forward to the session today.
So before we get going on the presentation, I wanted to share a Google Jamboard link with people in the chat here. So if you click on that link, you will get the Google Jamboard, and I'll share my screen to show you how it works. We want to ask you a few questions. Okay, hopefully people can I get like a thumbs up if people can see this? Okay, awesome, great. So on this first Jamboard, I'd like you to indicate where you're sort of dialing in from today. And on the left-hand side, you can pick the pen tool and make a little squiggly mark. So I'm kind of here-ish. If you are not on this map, I think I saw Ottawa, Sarnia in there. Go to the text box and you can then sort of type in. Then on the next few slides, and if you go to the top here, there's some arrows. Oh boy, what's that? No longer have an arrow. Oh, I have to approve all this stuff. I'm sorry, guys. Okay, so if you go to the next slide, And these next few slides are all repeats. I would invite you to, again, on the left-hand side, go to the sticky notes and indicate what you think is the biggest barrier to enhancing social connection for older adults during the pandemic. I'd just like to give a shout out to Heather Thompson, who emphasized the importance of using great language. And social isolation loneliness can be stigmatizing. In addition, that's kind of where we don't want to go. So I've been trying to use more language about where we do want to go, which is social connection, which I think is reflected in your hashtag. So that's great. So please work on these as we start the presentation. Okay, so I will share my presentation. Okay, and can I get a thumbs up for this one? You guys can see it? Okay, great. Okay, so let's get into our presentation today. We're going to be talking about a couple of different projects we've been working on and bringing it all together to understand the issues, our agenda, some brief introductions, then getting into the Putting Food on the Table project. I'll describe the approach and Donna will talk about it from the service provider lens. Then I'll discuss our Pandemic Stories project and then bring it all together to understand the issues. The Center for Elder Research is one of Sheridan College's 6 research and incubation hubs, and we are the only college-based research center on aging that we know of, and we're very proud of that. We do applied research, which means we love to partner. We love to partner with community organizations, with industry, and other academics.
Great. And when we look at Food for Life, for those who may not know who we are as an organization, we're an organization located in Burlington, Ontario. And essentially we do 2 main things. And this is our mission essentially, is rescuing food and impacting lives. So essentially what we're looking at is we rescue food within the community, have that be from a grocery store, a wholesaler, a greenhouse, and so forth. And then what we do is we redistribute that food into communities through various ways. And this is where that partnership with Sheridan really played a large role within our seniors population.
Great. Thanks, Donna. Okay, well, let's get into the project we've been working on together. So this is a partnership between ourselves, Food for Life, and also Community Development Halton. This is our team. Some terminology before we get going. Food security, for those who aren't all that familiar with the term, is defined as having sufficient healthy and acceptable food. Food security has been a growing issue in Canada, and its importance has been underscored during the pandemic, like the importance of so many other things. The purpose of our project has been to understand the food nutritional needs of older adults receiving healthy food packages from Food for Life during the pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, Food for Life had been partnering with a number of seniors buildings in the Halton area, and this is a map of where they're all located. And the model was that once a week, they would go into each of the buildings and bring fresh, healthy food and put it out on tables in the lobby or the activity center, and people could shop the market and take what food they wanted and the quantity that they wanted. So when the pandemic hit, they had to then pivot to individual bags that they put together in what they called the Healthy Older Adult Food Package. So this was an opportunity for them to ask, firstly, is this the right food mix? Are we getting it right? What else can we be doing? And then secondly, is there an opportunity to go from a food package to a wellness package? And thus the project was initiated. These were our methods. We started with a survey of the about 800 older adults in these buildings across Halton, did the analysis, and then in some design sessions determined the major needs and how to address them. And we're just finishing off implementation, and the final survey will be going out this week. Our baseline survey looked at demographics, food security, and COVID well-being. I'm going to be focusing on the COVID well-being piece because I think that might be the most interesting to folks, but I'll touch on a little bit of everything. So our age group, first of all, you can see with the dark blue, we received more responses from women than men. And in older age groups, there are more women than men, but also women are more likely to respond to your research, as probably many of you know. Age groups, 70s and 80s, age distribution between men and women, about the same. Living situation. So 2/3 of individuals were living alone. If we look at that between genders, over 70% of women were living alone, but actually the majority of men were living with someone, typically a common law spouse. We asked people what language they prefer to receive services in, and 85% said English, but 15% said other languages. And Food for Life tries really hard to provide services to people in the language that they need. So this is really important data. There are a number of ways of assessing food security, and one of them is simply to ask, do you have access to enough food? And people can respond never, rarely, sometimes, often, or always. We can see here that men are more likely to indicate that they might have food insecurity. And then if we break that down between men who live alone and men who don't live alone, so men who live alone is the dark orange, men who live alone are more likely to have food insecurity. So I'm just putting this up here to highlight the importance of disaggregating your data and sometimes slicing it in a few different ways. We asked people how much of a risk is COVID-19 to your health, safety, and well-being, and less than 10% said that it was low risk or completely safe. So people were taking it fairly seriously. About 20% weren't sure, which we did this survey last summer in August. So there's still a lot happening, and I think a lot of us were a little unsure what was happening. Well-being during COVID, again, we asked what poses the greater risk, staying home or going out. And as we all know, staying home and never leaving isn't good for us, yet still the vast majority of people felt that going out posed the greater risk. We asked people how often they leave their home for groceries and other supplies, and also for recreation and socializing. And we can see people are leaving their house once a week or less than once a week typically, and more for essentials and less for non-essentials. We asked people about whether they had someone they socialize with, and 77% said yes. But again, if we disaggregate that by gender, 63% of men and 86% of women said yes. So different stories. We also asked them, how do you socialize with others? And as you can see, phone and in person were the most popular avenues. Technology is used to some degree, but phone and in person are the big ones. I also wanted just to provide a little bit of the other feedback, non-COVID related, just to share with you. Many participants were unsure what to do with large quantities of a particular food. Food for Life 1 week might get a whole bunch of red peppers from some farmers, and so therefore have to redistribute a whole bunch of red peppers, and sometimes that large quantity is difficult for people. Some produce is bruised, which is the nature of rescued food, so that's an indication that, you know, we need to let people know it's not going to always be exactly like the grocery store. People wanted a greater variety of food, including more protein and pantry items. Okay, sorry about that. And that is not necessarily in the area that Food for Life always works in, but they said, hey, let's look into that. Also, people indicated needing personal protective equipment. 80% high nutritional risk, which is really high in this population and fairly alarming, underscores the importance of the work of Food for Life, bringing fresh, healthy food to people. And many said that they were feeling bored and left out. So our goals were to reframe and reinforce the purpose of Food for Life, to improve the quality of food being delivered and make users feel less isolated when using the services, increase the variety of food, and then also sort of provide these other things like PPE. So the implementation was essentially using two methods. One was to send out blasts of different packages that were forward facing. So some weeks the users would say, hey, look, this week looks quite a bit different than the other weeks. I'm getting a bunch of new things. In addition, there were a lot of behind the scenes activities. So I will describe our enhanced packages, and we've had sort of 3 blasts. We did a holiday package that included a holiday dinner, a grocery card. We also had a number of organizations in the community through Community Development Halton who learned that there were people feeling left out and isolated and said, hey, let's connect. And so people made artwork, people wrote holiday cards, people knitted blankets, amazing outreach. So all of those things were included in the holiday package. The education package went out in February. It included information about food for life, food rescue, food safety, some great recipes using food that often is available in these packages. In addition, a resource package about resources for older adults in Halton. During COVID, most of them using the telephone, and many of them, almost all of them, free. And in addition, we also sent people a little Valentine's Day card, and it had a link to a digital cabaret, and that was some sort of cabaret numbers that the Sheridan Musical Theater students developed for the different buildings. They wrote sort of love songs for these buildings, so we put a link there for people. Finally, the Spring Surprise Package is going out this week, or early next week, I think, right away. And that includes an amazing letter writing campaign that Community Development Halton has been working on. And we can talk about that more about that later. And some of these beautiful masks that Sheridan textile students have made for people. Behind the scenes, Food for Life has been making items available in smaller portions, no small feat, training volunteers to package high quality food and setting a standard for food variation. They've been working with food banks to bring pantry item bundles to older adults. For example, they've been working in Georgetown with Georgetown Bread Basket to not only bring people fresh food every week, but also the bread basket will bring some pantry items to people. And also Community Development Halton and Food for Life have been obtaining funding for protein, PPE, and then this letter writing campaign that's been ongoing. Okay, over to you, Donna.
Awesome. So us being able to work with Sheridan College and Community Development Halton on this initiative has been incredible from many different standpoints. And in the end, it was all about benefiting those receiving our food packages. So everything was very much a bonus for this partnership, essentially in better service providing. So I just want to talk a little bit about the power of partnerships and how I know that Lee talked about how we as an organization had to transition our method of service, where we used to run more or less like more of a market style at our different program sites, and we moved to more of the package, which you can see in the photo here. These are two of our volunteers up in Georgetown doing delivery. So essentially what was happening is these bags were being delivered every week to seniors within various buildings throughout Halton. And the great piece around this was that through this partnership, we were able to use volunteers that we had in-house, so our Food for Life volunteer packers, to pack these bags, to include materials from other organizations to reach approximately just over 800 seniors weekly within Halton region. So it was a great method and way to get information out using our packers in our warehouse, of course, and then the volunteers that are doing the delivery. These food packages almost became like a conduit for information. So then when the vaccine information came out, we were able to include those documents in our bags, as well as the letters of support and so forth. We also, as an organization, have an incredible relationship with Halton Region, with our Halton housing communities, which then allowed us to reach more of our seniors with this other additional information. Next slide. The other key piece with this initiative is the whole piece around surveying. So we as an organization do surveys yearly, as well as at different times throughout the year, depending on the project. But working with the expertise at Sheridan really allowed us as an organization to really get the information that we needed to understand better how to serve our older population. So essentially, we were able to work with Sheridan in creating the survey, ensuring that the questions that we were asking were indeed the the right questions to get down and drill down to the actual information that we needed, as well as collecting surveys. So we have always just done like paper surveys. We'd stand there and gather information from those that we were serving. This is all pre-COVID, but using the team at Sheridan was incredible because we were able to use other resources like the phone, which was being a smaller organization, we would never have the capacity to have a staff on hand to receive those calls continuously, to get the feedback and walk our participants through the survey. So this as well was a great tool that Sheridan could offer. And then of course, the last piece of the whole surveying is once you've gathered this data, now what do you do with it? So using Sheridan and having their support with the whole surveying the responses. And the other kind of key piece too is this idea of this power dynamic, this removal of that, where sometimes when we go in to do a survey at a program, we kind of feel that potentially those we're surveying are feeling that they have to give us good feedback, just to make sure that they know that we're grateful or that they were grateful to receive this, as well as to make sure that this service continues. Where if we kind of remove us from the equation and have a third party almost do that surveying, we really get more of a robust and possibly a deeper understanding. So next slide. So just some of the opportunities that kind of came up throughout this whole project. Some key pieces are highlighted here. One being granting, this ability to apply for additional grants where we were able to provide additional proteins and dairy items, which normally we may not have been able to do. This has really opened that door up to really have the facts around the need for these items if we don't get them on a donation basis. We also have the volunteer opportunities that arose within our packing program, as well as then the delivery of the packages within our buildings. In the end, our older adults are better supported. We're able to support them with past just receiving food. Us being a food organization, we've always just focused on supplying fresh food to those within the community who need it, but really understanding that we can go beyond that with doing the same thing we're doing, but including other items in these food packages has really gone along a lot further. And the last one is around engaging youth, and this card and letter writing, which is now continuing into another year, where we're able to really engage with the community to write a letter, reach out to a senior who's isolated, and understanding how that really goes a long way for those who may be isolated during this time. Next slide.
Okay, yeah, great. Well, thank you so much, Donna, and obviously thank you for all of the amazing work we've been doing together. It's been an incredible partnership, so thank you. So let's move into our second project, Pandemic Stories. This is the team for Pandemic Stories. It's a much smaller team, and I believe there could be someone on the call today who's from the team. So hi, nice to see you. A little background about the project itself. When the pandemic hit in March of 2020, there was widespread social concern about older adults. The virus seemed to be targeting older adults. So lots of public health policies around older adults, a lot of discussion about the safety of older adults, but what we wanted to do is to capture the experiences and the voices of older adults as the pandemic unfolded. And so that's what we did. So we recruited 25 people in the Halton and surrounding areas. So a few from Peel, we got a couple folks from Niagara, I think one from Toronto, otherwise in the Halton area. We recruited 20 women and 5 men, and even those 5 men were difficult to recruit. And as you can see from the age distribution, a lot of people in their 70s, but a range. Oh, and one last thing, 24 of the 25 people are living independently in the community. 1 person is living in long-term care. 22 of the individuals were already retired when the pandemic hit. So the 3 people that were working, 1 person continued to work, and actually the other 2 people decided to retire at that point. Our methods, so we have done so far 3 rounds of interviews. We conducted the first one last summer. the second one last fall, the third one in February and March of this year, and there might be a fourth. We're thinking maybe once it's all over, we can catch up with people to understand and look back on how the pandemic has affected them. But the story is still being written, so we're not entirely sure what the next phases look like. So I can report on some of our findings from these first 3 waves of interviews. Some of the results so far I'd like to share with you, and there are general, I guess, types of experiences or sort of buckets of experiences that people are having, and they're on a continuum from like your individual to a collective experience, somatic or physical experiences, trouble sleeping, troubles concentrating, health issues that get triggered by the pandemic, also emotional experiencing, anxiety provoking for many people. There's sort of fear and uncertainty. Grieving during COVID has been a very difficult experience, whether you've lost someone to COVID or not. Personal endeavors were just sort of halted. In fact, there was one individual who was on the plane when the country borders were shut down. So literally their vacation was ended. But other activities, learning, work obviously interrupted. Socialization interrupted. We had some people who didn't see their family for months and months on end because their family was terrified of bringing them risk in COVID. Community services such as healthcare have been on hold. And finally, civic engagement, going to church, volunteering, those things have been transformed. So this is not surprising. But what was really interesting and surprising is the following. We heard, I like being less busy and having a simpler life. I've been making a point of calling those I know who are alone. I have some amazing friends. I've reconnected with family from the UK. I've been busy with my church reaching out to people in our congregation. I have read some really amazing books. I have learned how strong I am. So all of these indicate resilience. And resilience is the ability to overcome or adapt effectively to adversities. So the question was, what does resilience look like during a global pandemic? So we've been borrowing the framework from Madsen, and they conducted a scoping review of resilience among adults. And they identified 3 either avenues or methods of resilience. First one was positive reframing and agency, and that's looking at all the good things in your life and not focusing on the things that you've lost. Personal meaning and purpose, really digging into those things that make your heart sing and make you feel like, you know, your life's worthwhile. And finally, acceptance and belonging, right? That connection with other people is a big part of resilience for many people. And one particular activity might have all of these. So these are categories that in real life kind of blur. But I'll share with you how these categories of resilience emerged in our interviews. For positive reframing and agency, we heard things like, I absolutely love feeding the birds. It's so wonderful to sit with them in the morning. And this was the individual that we spoke with that lived in long-term care. And you know, she had lost quite a bit. Her whole world shut down in many ways, but she focused on her growing relationship with the birds and the squirrels. Another person said, my faith has helped me stay well through this. It's comforting to feel a higher presence with me. And another person shared, we're lucky to have this garden, which gives us enormous pleasure. So whether it's strength for yourself, the divine, or the natural world, that sort of positive reframing and agency worked for many people. Personal meaning and purpose. So one person said it's amazing to see the different churches and mosques come together to feed the community. They were very involved in volunteering, and that was their way of making it through the pandemic, was connecting with others through volunteering. Another person, her way of finding resilience and meaning was to create moments of joy. She said, I've been creating daily videos of me dancing with my dog and posting them on social media. I want to bring a little joy and connection to others. And then finally, other people were pursuing more interesting or creative pursuits, and that was their way of achieving personal meaning and purpose. One person said, and those who are imaginative and creative enough are more and more saying, let's try this, why not this, and so on. And that's where I'm going. Even though I'm 75, I have this desire to expand as I grow older and not contract into being an old biddy. And finally, acceptance and belonging. First of all, some people found new ways to socialize. The old ways were sort of taken away from them. One person said that they have a hallway happy hour where they bring out a chair and a glass and sit in front of our doors and catch up. Part of acceptance and belonging is reaching out. It's reciprocal. One person said that she phones a few women she knows in the area who live alone just to check in on them. And then finally, acceptance and belonging can be about deepening your current relationships. So someone said, I've had some deep talks with my significant other about end of life. It was wonderful to talk that through. So the question is, how can communities support resilience during a pandemic? And we don't know, but I think it's a really important thing to think about because, how is it? People have this amazing ability to look at the bright side, to bounce back from things. So how can we support people in things that they might naturally have that ability to do? If you're interested in pursuing this, please email me. This is sort of, I think, our next step is to think practically, what does it mean? We're not there yet. Okay, so let's bring it all together and talk about understanding the issues. So when looking at your target population and trying to understand their needs and what's happening, there's a few questions you might consider asking yourself. First of all, who are you trying to reach? And that's in terms of demographics, where people live, obviously age, gender, language spoken, mobility, all sorts of things. The next question would be, what is their current connectivity? And it's not just technological connectivity, but social connectivity. Is it their family? Is it their cultural community? Is it their building? Maybe they're connected to a lot of other agencies. And through understanding people's networks and connections, you can leverage those and create sort of new partnerships. Maybe they receive food supports. And as we learned in the work with Food for Life, that was a conduit to connecting with people and bringing them more. So that's a big piece, what connections already exist. Also, what do they value? So socialization and social activity, for some people, they know that they value that, and that's amazing. And that's the hook. But for many people, that isn't necessarily interesting in and of itself. They might not necessarily value a new friendship, but they might value learning something with someone. They might value giving back. They might value doing something. So you get under the hood of what is the hook for people and what's the drive to help them build that meaning and purpose, then I think you can have some really effective and sticky, well, this is a dumb term, really effective strategies. And finally, how can you gather these data? As you saw from the work that we did, surveys are helpful. In-depth qualitative interviews, you can learn a lot about that value piece if you're really interested in that. There are other sort of simpler ways of doing it too. You can do key informant interviews. You can also leverage existing data. Stats Canada has some great data. The Canadian Longitudinal Study on Aging has a lot of COVID-related data that's emerging. In addition, other organizations are starting to collect some great data. I know Acclaim Health is collecting lots of great COVID-related data. Oakville Meals on Wheels, for example. So there's a lot out there, and we can start to leverage it with each other. So I would like to leave you with the just to say that deep understanding opens doors, and I'm really excited to see what doors have been starting to open with the next workshops and these next series, and what doors we can open together. And before I say goodbye, I have to put in a plug for the Sheridan Center for Elder Research, Social Isolation and Loneliness Toolkit. It is a toolkit available on Sheridan College's Source, and it was developed as part of a project that was called Building Connected Communities, Improving Supports to Reduce Loneliness and Social Isolation in Immigrants 65 Plus. And it includes social isolation measurement tools. It includes interactive maps of Halton and Peel. It also includes different demographic snapshots of all of the different neighborhoods in Halton and Peel. So please go there. There's lots of great tools for people. Thank you so much for listening. It was such a delight to be with you. This is my email and Donna's email, so please email us. Thank you.
Now, if anyone has questions for Lee and Donna, there's a couple of ways we can get questions to them. Lee and Donna, if you're available to stay for a few minutes so we can have some questions, you can type your question into the chat. I'm thinking there's also a hands up function in the reactions, but if you've got some questions, we want to have a dialogue. So anyone have a question?
Thank you, Zana, for posting that toolkit. That's great. I appreciate that. I had a question, Heidi. My presentation and the Google Jamboard, the PDF of that, will you be sharing that with people?
Yeah, so our goal is to send out to everybody who registered the presentations as well as anything that was developed during the conference. So yeah, those will be shared with everybody.
Great.
Does we have any questions so far? Any hands up? Any comments, anything that stood out from the presentation that anyone would like to comment on? I mean, I'll just mention, it's really great to see, listening to your presentation, how our three themes for the conference really came throughout the presentation. There was collaboration, there was innovation, there was connections made. I think it was just an excellent way to highlight how those three elements can really help reach isolated individuals. And there's a few comments I'm seeing in the chat as well. A great presentation, excellent presentation. Again, I can't quite see if anyone has their hand up. There's a comment in here. Did I hear somebody say something? Do I have a question?
Yes, this is Amy Weiler here from Sarnia Lambton. I work at a nonprofit in community engagement, and I run the age-friendly program here. And I'm interested to know a little bit more about your wellness packages and what you've found, like what you put in them, and just some more detail around that, please.
Donna, did you want to chat about that? Do you want me to field that one?
You can field it, Lee.
Okay. So those wellness packages were essentially in those enhanced packages. So in those blasts, we would send things in addition to the great food that people would receive every week. And in those, as I mentioned, there were some resources for older adults in the community, and things like where to get mental health services. Some great links and phone numbers for Senior Center Without Walls. It's recreation, it's connection, other just sort of services that have sort of shifted in the region during COVID. And there is a lot, and I think people don't know about them. So we put them all in one place for people. So hoping that was sort of helpful. In addition, we had, as I mentioned, I think artwork, and we had like the Valentine's Day card with the digital cabaret. And I think that the question about like what's in the wellness packages, it hasn't been completed like that. We haven't written the end of that song, because I think now that we know that conduit's open, Donna, right? Like there'll always be opportunity to send out more wellness essentially, and to sort of enhance that package as we go, I suspect. Great.
Okay, there are a few things in the chat as well. So this question, the first question actually is more to the to us as the planning team, the isolation connection report mentioned at the beginning of the session is that is posted to the, sorry, I just lost, the chat moved on me, is posted in the web link. I think that is the isolation connection report. We'll make sure that there's access to that report. Okay, and questions to Donna and Lee. You mentioned surveys. How did the older adults cope with IT in terms of online communication and feedback?
Yeah, do you want to talk about that, Donna, or do you want me to like?
Yeah, you can talk about it, Lee, how we shifted, right?
So in our proposal, we said we are going to have an online survey, and we did that, and 8 people responded. So we thought, oh, this isn't working. Maybe we have to send everyone in their package a paper-based survey and send them a stamped return envelope, and that's how we got the over 200 responses. We also had a telephone line open if people wanted to do it over the telephone. In addition, we had that available for people who wanted to do their survey in a language other than English. We could do that over the phone. But yeah, so the way we dealt with tech was to avoid it. So that was our learning.
Okay, excellent. And another question, there's a couple of comments I'll read after, but another question. What considerations come into play when bringing a new partnership so quickly? How did you know it was a fit to proceed?
So I think from Food for Life standpoint, we've worked with Sheridan on some other projects actually. And so that of course was very helpful. But I think in the end, I know as we move forward with any organization, it comes down to the philosophy of service for us as an organization to really ensure that there's alignment there as we start going down the different roads with granting, of course, because then that's where you're jointly asking, as well as then in your service when you're providing service essentially too. So it all comes back down to, for us, it's a lot to do with the philosophy and ensuring that we're both on the same path. So I don't know if you want to add anything, Lee.
Yeah, and I think that's all really insightful. The thing I might add is that it was pretty clear with the 3 different organizations that we each had our own skill set that we offered, and I think that was really helpful. And yeah, so I think that I think someone needs to mute. Thanks. So yeah, so I think having those, everyone had their own strengths and their own perspective, and that really helped. And yeah, I think actually, Donna, like you and I had met maybe a year prior to that. Just we'd been sort of, I know I was sort of like hanging out with you guys to see if there'd ever be an opportunity to work together. So, you know, it wasn't like I had never met you before. So it was kind of the first time we actually got to work together. So that helped too, I think.
Again, just a couple of the comments that are in here. Some people commenting how they appreciated how multiple community groups were involved. They like the idea of the Valentine card and the letters. It's amazing. Interesting to hear about the different ways seniors are coping with the pandemic and how it is reframed as a positive experience. And then question, how are clients referred to the program or service? Sorry, we've got a bit of feedback there, so we'll just one moment while we figure that out. Okay, I think that's better now.
So our Food for Life programs in community is if the individual lives in the building where the program is being offered, then they have access to the program. So we don't qualify people. It's merely if you live in the building, you have access to that program within your building. We also do run open programs within the community that are in partnership with many faith-based organizations actually. And those programs in our community are also open to whomever is in need of fresh food. So there too, we're not asking anyone to qualify. It's a matter of understanding and knowing where the different locations are And oftentimes that's through word of mouth that many people find out about it, or they can go to our website where the sites are listed and individuals can just attend the program.
Okay. And again, just some of their comments, paper-based still wins. Did many people sign up for the non-English mode?
0 people signed up for that. So the question still remains, that like, is it that people didn't need it, or that wasn't the right avenue for people to be involved? And we certainly know that a number of people, as you know, responded that don't have English isn't their preferred language of receiving services, but they still responded in the English-based survey. But the fact that no one sort of phoned us and asked for the interview or the survey to be done in their own languages, I think it means that we still have more work to do. We're still trying to figure out what's the best, how do we connect with people, right? So love to learn from others and have any ideas about that.
Okay, are there any other questions? If anyone has a question they'd like to ask, please feel free to unmute yourself and just ask Lee and Donna.
I have a quick question. I was just wondering what you felt, what skill sets did the Sheridan students bring to the project?
I would love to hear from Donna because I have a million things to say about that, but I'm so biased.
So the Sheridan students, it's interesting. I think from my perspective, what they brought is more of an academic feel, and they had a greater understanding, I guess, from an academic standpoint, from us just doing. So us as an organization, we do a lot within the community. We're moving at mock speed sometimes. So this is where it is actually really great to partner with organization, school essentially, that has that educational background where they're in the now with what's happening in community with the learnings essentially. So I know from that piece, that was extremely helpful, as well as I think just fresh eyes on things. So we also as an organization, we have we've had a few of the same staff throughout working in community, and it's great to have kind of some fresh eyes on some our project, how we're working, and be able to really exemplify what we're doing with their help.
I have a question. How did you identify these seniors that needed this?
That needed our service?
Yes.
Yep. So they have self-identified in that we as an organization go into different housing communities, so many co-op based communities, and offer this as a service. And then anyone within that co-op comes forward and says, yes, I'd love a weekly delivery. And then what happens, as we've seen through COVID, is we had numbers go up drastically, and then numbers go down again. And then almost as the waves were going, we would see this influx, and then people would call in and come off the list, and then they'd come back on the list. So it was very much them signing up for the program themselves.
I see. I live in Kingston. The population is not as dense, we'll say, as where you are. How do you identify the people that are not in these housing projects?
So that is a good question. I would say from our perspective right now, we offered, because of COVID, we actually offered a delivery program within our communities for that exact reason, to reach those who may not be able to get out into community. So that's where it was a matter of just, I guess the question then is, did we reach them around giving them the information, or did they know that delivery was available? And that's where we hope that they did at one point receive information around the supports, as we work very closely with Acclaim Health within community, as well as many other organizations that work to support our senior population, hoping that through them and other conduits that information was shared with those who weren't potentially in a cooperative housing complex.
I see. Thank you.
A couple more questions in the chat. Do you find that a lot of service referrals come from the volunteers who deliver? For example, the volunteer reports back that the client may need other services or supports. Do you then connect them to other service agencies?
Yep. So this, so from our standpoint, what happens is we do have a great relationship with our volunteers who are in community delivering in these various buildings. And there is that report back where if they see a greater need, they do reach back into us. So we do have a neighbor navigator position at Food for Life who is very connected into the community as to what resources are available. We also have that neighbor navigator as a connect for anyone calling in for service. And if that individual is giving our neighbor navigator some additional information, she's then also able to share back out to that person that she's speaking with around other resources that they may want to tap into for support.
Question was, do you use volunteers who are older adults to persuade seniors to join in?
So sorry, I just want to understand the question. So do we target seniors? Is that what you mean? Do we bring in older adults in order to have other older adults come in and volunteer? Is that the question? Yeah. Sorry. I can say that our volunteers are all ages, essentially. I know that many of our programs that do run in the daytime that are in our seniors buildings. So then we are stuck to a certain demographic unless an individual isn't working. So many of our many of our volunteers within program are an older demographic. But then we do also offer some evening programs within community where we have, then it would be open to many other people. But definitely, I know in our warehouse where we pack our food bags, we do have a wide range of volunteers who come in and support that initiative.
So one thing I might also add, Donna, I think Robert was also talking about peer persuasion to answer the survey. And so actually that was one of the great things about having some people phone in. We have a nice chat with someone and they said, well, this is great. I'll let my neighbors know that they should answer the survey because this is a really important thing to do. So that could have been happening through the paper-based ones, but I could definitely tell through the phone surveys then that kind of networking was happening and there would be that peer persuasion to people to get their neighbors to respond. We did kind of see this initial a few, and then we got a bunch of responses. So I think that peer persuasion was probably part of it.
Thank you, Lee and Donna. I'm going to take this opportunity just to wrap up this section so we can move on to our next section, as I've been kind of tagged to do so. But on behalf of the Planning Committee, I really want to thank both of you for really setting the context for this setting. I think we could spend the next 45 minutes that we have to continue this discussion, but you've really shown us how food as a basic need for all of us has really set the tone, has set the ability perhaps for some innovative additions that can happen to support our seniors. And you've collaborated with a variety of different partners to do this. And you've used ways that are not tech, right? So when I look at the Jamboard and everything that identifies is that the biggest barrier is the technology. And you found a way to do it without relying on the technology and speaking to what each of the seniors values and what's important to them, and found a way to deliver that, and have found a way to help seniors recognize the resilience that they have and continue to support. So amazing presentation. Thank you so much. I was hoping, Lee, you would answer that question. I had my pen ready when you said, how can we build on this resilience? I was ready to write the answer down. And I guess that's up to us, all of us, to work together as to how can we support those in our community and help them continue to build our resilience and look to see what doors are there for us. So thank you very much just look forward to our next conversation.
Okay, so moving into our next opportunity for today to really further this dialogue, and I think this conversation has really built the context for what we're doing next, where we can really talk a little bit more together and continue to build on this great work. So you will be randomly assigned and moved into a breakout room automatically once we say go. In each room, there is a lead who's going to take you through our networking activity. And then once that is done, you will be automatically brought back here into this main room to have a larger discussion. So the networking activity, sorry, next slide. Yeah, the networking activity, we're going to talk about a senior. And our senior is, you're going to get to know our Mrs. Smith. So Mrs. Smith is an isolated senior. You will have access to this as well when we get into the break room, but just she's alone. She's living in an apartment building, living in Peel on a fixed budget. She's supported by her two daughters who live not in her community. One lives quite far in Florida, another one's a little bit closer by in Niagara. She's in the early stages of Parkinson's, but is managing okay with her needs. The pandemic has been hard for Mrs. Smith, and she's very active, attending weekly church services, shopping and visiting her friends. With the current stay-at-home order and mandated lockdowns, she feels isolated and scared to leave her apartment. So what we're going to do in our groups is talk about Mrs. Smith, but in the context of who we are and what we do and how could we help Mrs. Smith. So again, your facilitators in your group will have this information, and we are going to be using a Jamboard again. So we will put the Jamboard link in the chat here, so you can all join into the Jamboard. Your facilitators will also have that link. If you get stuck, if you end up not in a breakout room, don't worry, we'll put you in there. And again, you should be able to leave the breakout room after, but if you feel like you got stuck in that breakout room, we'll come get you. We won't leave you in there. And then we'll come back and we'll have a bit of a discussion together about what each group can do to help Mrs. Smith. So again, the Jamboard link has been posted to the chat, so you can open that up in advance of heading into your room. And I think that's it. So we're looking forward to some discussion. We've got about 15 minutes together to chat in our breakout rooms, and then share to the larger group. So we'll see you all soon.